Today, California drivers owe these two gentlemen massive, massive, massive gratitude. I've always known Sergio as a general, as an advocate, but today he surpassed every level, right? Here you have Pablo Gomez, here you have Sergio, right? And what they did is they read all the fine print. They figured out the shenanigans, right? Because you got Tony West, the smart ass, this legal guy, and CEO Dara Khosrowshahi trying to constantly circumvent drivers. And these two just slapped them down. They literally just farted in Dara's face and said, listen, cough up. Millions and millions, perhaps even hundreds of millions of dollars for California drivers. So if you are a California driver, if you can go to his channel or go to Show Me the Money Club, Sergio, thank you what you do for drivers, right? And when I had a long conversation with David Risch, and David Risch, I hope you're listening up. You said you watch my videos. If you want two generals, you have one and you have one. It's $500,000 a piece. Put down $1 million and you'll have two of the strongest advocates, fighters that have all the drivers on their side. And you can turn this company around. $1 million is nothing. He deserves the 500. I deserve the 500. He's cost them millions. I cost them millions in lawsuits. He costs them millions in figuring out the fine print. So Pablo Gomez has been a full-time driver. This dude, I like him. Since 2019, he takes pride in knowing how to maximize his earning on each trip he takes. That means knowing the right times to drive, which rides to accept and which to pass up. And it also means knowing the letter of the law that governs his trade. In particular, it means knowing Proposition 22, right? This is where Uber, Lyft, and all the others try to really screw over the drivers and delivery drivers. The controversial ballot measure that passed in 2020 and became law in 2021, inside and out. For the gig drivers of California, Gomez's eagle-eyed attention to detail paired with a fellow driver's fighting spirit resulted in a windfall that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It's time to cough up, right? And I bet when this news broke and it got out there and everybody jumped on it, I jumped on it, media jumped on it, LA Times jumped on it, Dara just went freaking him out, right? Because these assholes think we are stupid, right? They do not know that they read the fine print. They do not know our social media marketing skills. They do not know our contacts to the media. They do not know my contacts to 12 different law firms, right? We fight, my friends. We are not shy to fight, right? We have the DNA to fight. I'm sure in his background and my background, there's a lot in common, right? I was in South Africa, grew up on the street, was in the army, not afraid of these punks, right? He's the same DNA. So we call them out, and we're not, a lot of people are just too afraid when they have something like, oh my God, something's going to happen to me. No, listen, that's why at all times, I have it on me. Because I don't know. You never ever know who's around the corner and what it is. Listen, we expose a lot of the crap, right? And we cost them a crap load of money. He's on their shit list, right? He's just cost them over hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially, right? So Proposition 22, you might recall, overrode part of AB 5, a law that classified gig workers as employees, entitling them to benefits and protections. The ballot measure instead carved out app-based gig workers as independent contractors and put in place a raft of better than nothing half measures. Instead of full healthcare coverage, gig workers got a healthcare subsidy if they worked enough hours to qualify. Instead of minimum wage, drivers got a minimum earnings guarantee, but only for engaged miles, not time spent between rides. And think of it this way, ladies and gentlemen. When the public It's a big city, United States' second biggest city, right? When citizens, when the public are reading this and realizing that drivers are exposing the corruption of these companies. I mean, what does the public think of these companies? What does the public think of America's most hated CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi? You can't even go on the street or in the subway without security entourage that he pays almost $2 million per year, right? Because they know they are marked. They know that they are stiffing and screwing over drivers left and right, and people have had enough. This is why these people can't even go out in public. It's not a lifestyle for his kids, for his wife, for him, right? When you engage, when you screw over drivers, and we have to find the laws and get those hundreds of millions of dollars back, ladies and gentlemen, right? Can you think for a second what these two drivers alone just did, right? They impacted the stock, right? This broke, and then investors said, Wall Street said, what else are you hiding? What other surprises are around the corner, right? The stock goes down. So, you potentially wipe out billions of dollars because you expose the corruption. Investors don't want to have all of this corruption unearthed, right? Especially not from drivers, right? Starting in 2021, gig app companies were to pay drivers 30 cents per mile driven on the job. But Proposition 22 also stipulates that every year the rate will be raised to keep pace with inflation. Since inflation was 6.82 in 2022, that fee was supposed to be bumped up 2 cents. In 2023, it should have gone up 2 more to 34 cents per mile. This is where it gets interesting. As far as Gomez could tell, no such increase ever took effect. He's right. As of early this year, drivers were still being paid 30 cents per mile. Now, 2 to 4 cents a mile might not sound like much, but to gig workers driving hundreds of miles a day, it adds up fast. In the course of a year, those pennies can add up to hundreds, even thousands of dollars, multiplied across nearly 1.5 million gig app drivers in California. It can add up to tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars. Pay up, right? Pay up. You steal the money, you steal the tips, you steal the bonuses when people hit their goals, right? Newbies, you're constantly stealing the money, and we are going to expose this corruption. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I did a video yesterday called National Strike. Quick diversion here. It looks like it's going to be that July 4th weekend, and the campaign is going to be called I Am Worth It. I am worth it. Yes, we are worth it. We're worth the safety. We're worth the money, right? We have to step into our self-worth. I Am Worth It campaign, proving, showing the outside world that we are true independent contractors and should be treated as such, right, will more than likely be launched on that weekend. More to come. In March, Gomez was having dinner with a colleague, Sergio Avidian. They texted and corresponded a lot, but never met in person. Avidian is a long-time Uber driver too, and in recent years, he's turned to advocacy as well. He's a senior contributor at the Rideshare Guy, where he runs a podcast that tackles the ins and outs of ride-hailing, policy, and gig working life. Now, I know that it was a safe place for Dara Khosrowshahi to go and be interviewed by Harry Campbell until Sergio came along. And believe me, Uber did not like the fact that Sergio was on board. I know that for a fact, right? Because he was exactly the opposite. There were no lowballing. There were no soft questions. Everything was just hardcore. You answer what I ask you, right? And he's a no-nonsense guy, just the same as I. And I've met with him, and I know we're alike. We're alike. So Avidian is a force. He keeps an Excel spreadsheet of every one of the thousands of rides he provides each year, logging his fare, miles traveled, pay, and so on. He gathers data from other drivers, many of whom now listen to his show. He likes driving for the ride-hailing companies, but he is hell-bent on keeping them honest. During his meal with Gomez, Avidian started getting calls from reporters to comment on some news. Proposition 22, which had been struck down by a superior court in Alameda County in 2021, had been upheld on appeal. All the commotion reminded Gomez of the matter of weirdness with the vehicle expense rate. He mentioned it to Avidian. Sergio immediately started doing math in his head, Gomez calls. When they pored over the law, they realized that Proposition 22 had technically saddled the California Treasurer's Office with the task of calculating and publishing the adjusted rate each year, which, as far as they could tell, it had not done. For 18 months, nothing was done, Avidian said. I missed 18 months. Everyone missed 18 months. I was like, holy shit, this could be a lot of money. There are some 1.3 million gig workers in California, according to industry reports, including over 209,000 Uber drivers, 200,000 DoorDash drivers. I'm telling you, it's going to be like $100 to $300 million, Avidian said. On April the 13th, Gomez called the state treasurer's office and asked about the rate adjustment. The first person he reached directed him to the IRS webpage for information on mileage-based tax deductions. After explaining what he was after and spending some time on hold, Gomez assured the rate would be published soon. Weeks went by after conferring with Avidian again. Gomez tweeted at Fiona Marv, the California treasurer, asking why the rate hadn't been changed yet, right? So he calls her out. Avidian boosted the tweet too, and a week later, on May 10th, Marr replied announcing that the rate adjustment had been published. Almost immediately, perhaps fearing the prospect of a class action lawsuit, Uber and DoorDash began sending the back pay to drivers. You guys saw money trickling in, not much, and I'm sure class action suits will follow because I'm sure they're hiding a lot of the money. Avidian, who drives only part-time and picks profitable rides, got 85 from Uber. His wife, who drives part-time too, got more than 200 from DoorDash. Remember, drivers get paid only if they're making the minimum rate, and many ride-hail drivers exceed it. But there's one kind of driver who tends to make the minimum, as they rely on tips for income: delivery drivers. Delivery is horrible for base pay, Avidian says. If you're a full-time Uber Eats or Grubhub driver, you're getting over $1,000 in mileage reimbursement guaranteed. All said, the catch-up payments stand to be a huge boon to gig workers and delivery drivers throughout the state. Uber, whose business spans ride-hailing and food delivery, won't say how much it paid out, but the anecdata suggests it's a lot. As of writing, Uber and Lyft, DoorDash have begun issuing back pay. Instacart and Grubhub have not. Since the payout applies to all companies that work with independent contractors, it applies to Amazon, Flex, Target, Shipt, Walmart, Spark as well. Those companies tend to pay above the minimum. So what happened? Why weren't drivers getting the full rate all along? Consumers are paying for it after all. As Avidian points out, every time you take a Lyft or order Uber Eats, you're paying an extra 75 cents to $1 for a fee marked California driver benefits, which is then ostensibly used to pay for things like health subsidies and a mileage fee. The resulting pile of money is one the app companies got to sit on for a year and a half, earning interest or investing it or using it to cover losses or so on. This is where it gets murky. When I asked Uber why it didn't pay drivers the adjusted rate as Proposition 22 requires it to do, the company blamed the Treasurer's Office for not publishing the adjusted rate. See how they spin it, ladies and gentlemen? As outlined in the proposition, the California Treasurer's Office is required to update per mile compensation for vehicle expenses based on inflation. Uber spokesman Zahid Arab, pull your face out of the sand, dude. You know you're lying, right? You caught with your panties down. Told me in an email that office released those updates last week for 2022, 18 months late, and for 2023. We are in the process of making all necessary adjustment to ensure the benefits afforded to drivers by Prop 22 will continue to be met. The state treasurer's office, meanwhile, hit back. The characterization that the treasurer's office was somehow late posting the adjustment is misinformed and disingenuous, Joe DeAnder, the communications director for the Treasurer's Office, said in a statement. Prop 22 was struck down as unconstitutional in August 2021, he said. So the office deemed the law unenforceable. Given the uncertainty of the law's status, he added, and the ongoing legal activity, the State Treasurer's Office refrained from publishing the adjusted rate and only felt it prudent to do so when the law formally took effect this March. Moving forward, the DeAnder said adjustments will be calculated and published every January. Now, one reason that the Treasurer's Office might be defensive about the timeline here is that California State Treasurer Fiona Ma is running for Lieutenant Governor in the next election cycle. She provided a statement on the matter too. More money going into the pockets of drivers is a good thing, she said. App-based delivery services have become a major source of economic activity for California, and the provision that requires the state's treasurer's office to provide annual adjustments to the vehicle expense reimbursement rate is critically important since none of it would be possible without the drivers' willingness to use their own vehicles to work. I encourage all drivers to check their accounts for these payments and hope all companies will quickly issue reimbursements if they haven't already. The Treasurer's Office says it has already been flooded with calls from drivers looking for their payments, but it has no ability to pay them. That duty falls to the gig app companies themselves. The Treasurer's responsibility begins and ends with adjusting that rate. The Treasurer has heard from some drivers that Uber is encouraging them to contact the Treasurer's Office, despite knowing it has no power to provide funds of any kind to them. See how Uber's trying to divert, not pay out? Oh, let's blame the Treasurer's Office. It also might be noted that while the law charges the state with calculating and publishing the rate, it's not entirely clear that the gig app companies aren't responsible for paying the adjusted rate, even if the state doesn't do so. It is, in short, a big stinking mess. And while Uber tries to throw the Treasurer's Office under the bus, and that office claims it couldn't make the adjustment on time due to legal uncertainty, guess who gets the short end of the stick? The gig workers. And that, says Vina Dubal, professor at the University of California College of Law, is the entire point. This is what the gig app companies that wrote Prop 22 were trying to do. Make a big, stinking mess that would be perennially hard to sort out. It was specifically written to be confusing, Dubal tells me, to everyone, voters, consumers, drivers, state actors. That's because, as Dubal's scholarship has shown, gig app companies which have never been profitable depend on taking every conceivable opportunity to squeeze workers, engaging in practices such as algorithmic wage discrimination and rampant corner cutting. Again, this is by design. I bet if you asked any given voter what Prop 22 did, they would say it benefits workers, Dubal says. In fact, it took rights away from workers and dramatically lowered the wages they were owed under the law. I can only imagine the companies hope that no one at the Treasury's office would notice the strange new responsibility so they could nickel and dime drivers. Those companies which spent more than $200 million on Prop 22 didn't count on drivers like Gomez and Avidian. Honestly, it feels great, Gomez says. I hope that this brings a bright spotlight on a broken system that exploits workers and consumers alike. Avidian, for his part, is already moving on to the next challenge. He wants to take stock of what it is that the gig companies are doing with all the money they get under the California driver benefits fee they slap on the millions of rides the app companies facilitate every day. There's no public accounting of how that money gets used, and none required by the letter of the law. And we've already seen what happens when no one forces the gig companies to meet. Nothing. Brian Merchant is the Los Angeles Times technology columnist. Thank you so much for writing it. And to these two gentlemen, massive gratitude. We are going to keep on fighting. We're going to keep on exposing. I hope, Sergio, we can do a show very soon together, and I hope you will help push the July strike, national and international strike, and we are going to be calling the strike, I Am Worth It. Huge shout out to Gig Rocket. If you have been wrongfully deactivated, go to gigrocket.com. We'll help you get back on the platform. It looks like that, gigrocket.com. Also, a huge shout out to Legal Rideshare, Bryant Greening, who actually wrote and congratulated Sergio on this article, right? He is the main attorney at Legal Rideshare, ladies and gentlemen, and he's a phenomenal guy. He has helped thousands of drivers get monies if they have been in accidents. Go check them out at legalrideshare.com, right? If you have been in an accident, if your passenger's been in the accident with you, there he is. I was just looking it up. That's Brian Greening there. Go to legalrideshare.com. Also, a huge shout out to my sponsor, Display Ride. There they are. Get yourself the best dash cam that uploads the footage into the cloud. Legal rideshare.com works with Display Ride as well. So that is a powerful duo there, Legal Rideshare and Display Ride. Go check them out. And again, massive thank you to these two gentlemen. Have a good night, everyone.